Alright, this is for Alexandre Sande. So the first thing that I would say right off the bat is that you're using a lot of, it looks like photo textures, and then you have stuff on top of it, and you're basically layering your stuff on top of everything. And so the problem you run into is you've got all this information in here and all these refined textures and no real design. And so what that means is, looking at it from the small view, the shapes don't really come together. You've got basically, looking at this here, I'm just going to use red. There we go. Okay, so looking at this, you've got your base shape here, and this reads well because it's basically created with the white. However, when I'm looking at it with a small view, your other strong shape here is this here and this here. There's no separation from the background element. I don't see a lot of information in there that basically kind of separates the elements. And so I think those are definitely things that you want to really look at and really kind of start evolving a little bit more. So the first thing I see is you've got lines coming here. It looks like there's a line here, and so it looks like there's water, or trying to be water here. And so some of these elements aren't really kind of popping out the way they should be. You want to have a lot more simplistic elements. And I understand that you're including texture and all of that information in there, but the problem with it is you've got so much texture, nothing is pulling out. So let's look at, like, the first thing I would do is let's take out some of this, and I'm just going to grab in some transfer there. So you've got this white here. Let's add in a little bit of the sky. And so do you see how by taking out some of that sky, or bringing some of that sky in, I'm now making a much more interesting element. Then I'm going to add in, it looks like you have water, but it's not reading well. So let's add in some water here, and you can still have the information behind it. And you see how by doing that, by separating those elements, I'm getting something much more interesting to look at. And then again, let's break down, and we'll just use this green here, and I'm going to break down really simple the green trees here. And we can have, you can have different things like that. But there's nothing really having me look at this character. Everything is kind of having me flow off the page. So I'm going to just take some of this green here, and so now you see it's starting to read well. Now I can have variations of green, and I can have different green textures. I can have all of that stuff. But if you keep it the same value point, what's happening is I'm now going to start narrowing my field of view and look at the important things. And that's really what you want to have happen, is you want to have me look at the value of important things. The other thing you have is you have a lot of information here on the original. Looking here, you've got all this detail in the background, all this detail in the foreground, all this detail in the midground. And so what's suffering is the amount of information that you have from the rest of the space. So simplify your elements and tell me what you want me to look at. In this case here, you are trying to focus on the main character, And by focusing on the main character, you need to have points that draw me in. And right now, looking at what you've got no real kind of implementation. Like you've got a diagonal line coming this way here. So you've got diagonal line coming out this way from the character. And it could as easily be drawing me out as well as in. You've got tangents going on here. So I've got a lot of swords, a lot of trees pointing me up. I have the swords pointing me to your name, and this pointing me out. So actually, you know, I start here because it's the brightest focal area, but I'm slowly being pushed away from here. I'm not being pushed in. So again, I would have, you know, like here, I'm going to have something that, you know, starts pulling me back into this. You know, and it can be as simple as, first I'm going to kind of implement a little bit more so it's not so it doesn't create so much of a tangent there. And then you want to have things bring me in. So I'm going to really cut down. Let's cut down like this. And you see how by just cutting that down, I'm now breaking up my shape. I'm breaking up my elements to, and I'm probably even going to cut some of this down here. Alright, so you can see me breaking this down, and then I'm put some of that green back in, and even with the green behind the character, you can see that that green is pulling me back into like that character. So it's like now I've got something that's drawing me towards this character, and even though it's rough and you know, it's not perfect by any means, it's still pulling me better into that character. The other thing is, you know, anatomy. You're using all these photo textures and stuff like that, and you're foregoing the natural elements of anatomy. I don't see, again, simple things like shoulders. Define the shoulders. You know, I've got, you know, you've got your character, you've got your anatomy, you've got, you know, here's torso, like so. And so you can see all this information on there, but I'm not really following any of the form. You know, things don't follow perspective very well. You know, it just, the anatomy just feels off. And so by going in here and defining, again, let's define some of the shoulder off here, so it creates a better silhouette, because the silhouettes are what's going to make it read better. And you can see just by adding in a little bit of information in there to separate those elements, it's going to make things look a little bit more kind of developed. And then, you know, here, foreground, background, like the cape is in the background, so start pulling some of the elements of the cape back into the background, like shade out the cape so that you can see that element, kind of start unifying, and now I'm starting a little bit more to look at the key element of which is your character. And he's just kind of standing there nonchalant. The other thing is make sure all of your texture and lighting is very similar. Looking at this, you've got no real sense of lighting going on, and then you've got a strong sense of shadow here. So if you're going to maintain that strong sense of shadow here, you need to maintain it everywhere. So, and as you can see by simplifying the foreground elements a little bit more, now I'm having him stand, and it's looking a little bit more interesting. And so adding these elements in there are going to kind of help you kind of work on your flow. So don't, you know, you've got a lot of stuff going on, and it needs to be simplified. Otherwise, what's going to happen is it's just going to get too convoluted, and I'm going to not look at it because it's too much detail. All right. I would take a look at the Hudson River painters in this case to kind of get some inspiration and see how they unify things with light and color, even though they have a lot of detail going on. All right.
Hey, I wanted to thank everyone for subscribing to my Patreon, and if you haven't yet, check it out.